This call is now being recorded.
So I am sitting here today with my grandmother, Johnie Mae Lawrence. Today we'll be talking about family traditions she learned from her family, traditions she hopes to pass on to us, and just her experiences. So to begin, Grandma Johnie, what are the traditions that your family passed on to you?
What category do you want to start with? Holiday, everyday, date?
I think food is a big one for our family.
Food? I think food and dating, but we'll start with food.
Okay.
Okay. The earliest memory I have, probably about 9, and it was during Thanksgiving and Christmas were the holidays. But the everyday food items, I remember as far back as maybe 5 or 6, even before I started school. So do you want me to elaborate?
Yeah, just, any food traditions you experienced, your New Year's Day meals, the weekend meals your mom used to do, just any little food tradition that you used to do all the time that you knew really well.
Okay. A standard as far as everyday meals, just everyday ordinary meals. My mother would alternate and cook different things Monday through Thursday. But on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, it was specific. It was a given. You knew what you were going to have. In the Sunday meals, you were going to have fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, and she would alternate side dishes. But the collard greens, cornbread, and fried chicken was a staple. If you showed up at the house, you know what you're going to get. Sometimes we do white rice. Sometimes she'd do mac and cheese or potato salad. But the 3 staples, again, were fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread. That was our Sunday meal. And then we have our Friday and Saturday meal. We would have spaghetti with a salad and garlic bread. And on Fridays, we would have a meatloaf. We knew when Friday came, it was meatloaf. We knew when Saturday came, it was spaghetti. So those were our standards. And as far as dessert, it was whatever she was in the mood for. But on first Sunday, always first Sunday, it was my father's choice. Second Sunday, it was her choice what dessert we would have. Third, she would alternate between the 3 girls, me and my 2 sisters. And if we had a 5th Friday, it was the cook's choice, which means my mother could pick whatever she wanted. So that was the staple of our everyday meals. Now, for holiday meals, coming into the new year, it was always Hoppin' John's, and she did that for good luck, and collard greens was for financial prosperity. It was cash. It was green. And one tradition we always had, you had to put money in your pocket or in your bra or in your sock. You had to have money on you to ensure that you would never be broke throughout the year. So that was our New Year's. And as far as Christmas and Thanksgiving, we always had 2 meats. It was turkey or ham. And then we'd have the side dishes naturally, sweet potatoes and yellow rice, always yellow rice with peas, and potato salad, mac and cheese, the standard stuff. And as far as Christmas, it was always ham. We never had turkey for Christmas. It was always a ham with all the trimmings. So as I grew up and I got married and got my own family, I adopted those traditions. So I'm pretty much mimicking what my mother did growing up, and I've tried to instill that in my daughter. My daughter does not follow all the traditions, but one that she has not followed, and that's the Hoppin' Johns. For whatever reason, she does not like Hoppin' Johns. She never cooks Hoppin' Johns.
Interesting.
So that's our tradition as far as food and cooking goes.
Do you know how the tradition started? Like, was it just easier for her to cook the same thing all the time? Or, you know, did you guys want the same meals all the time? Like, how did it come about that these were your standard meals?
Well, it started with my great-grandmother, and her name was Cora Brown. And she used to cook the same thing, and she passed it on to her daughter, whose name was Janie Burns. And Janie Burns passed it on to my mother, Ruth Sherman, and I tried to pass it on to my daughter, Candace Cohen. And hopefully she'll, along with me, will pass it on to my granddaughter, Jasmine Cohen. And Cora basically started doing it because my grandfather loved those meals. He loved her cornbread. He absolutely loved her collard greens. Sometimes he would just get a bowl of collard greens and dip the cornbread in it and eat it and make that a meal. He liked chicken as well, and she usually did that on Sundays because the pastor or the deacons or somebody would always come by for dinner. And they weren't rich, so chicken was the least expensive meat she could get that would stretch and feed a bunch of people. So basically that's how she started that. And on Saturday she basically did spaghetti because it was easy, it was plentiful. You could boil a bunch of noodles. It was quick, and it was not expensive at all. And Friday she did it because after my grandfather worked all week, she wanted him to have a nice stick-to-the-ribs dinner on Friday. So that's basically how it started.
Interesting. And I heard a bit of what you said earlier about how with moms the tradition really wasn't sticking as much. Do you have any idea why she may not have the same food traditions that you and your mother had?
Yes, because a lot of things that we have, my daughter does not like. She does not like collard greens. She will not eat them. She does not like Hoppin' Johns. Again, I said Hoppin' Johns. So there are things she just doesn't like. Her taste buds just doesn't care for. And she doesn't do it to break tradition. She just truly does not like the taste or smell of collard greens, and she doesn't like the taste of the beans with the rice. So that's basically why she kind of broke tradition on a few things, but she still cooked the other things that we do, the ham, the turkey, the sides. She just doesn't like them, so she doesn't cook them. So
would you recommend adjusting certain recipes so that
absolutely
the aspect of the collard greens and Hoppin' Johns continues, even though she doesn't like cooking it themselves?
Well, I'm hoping that's where you come in. I'm hoping that you will adopt this, or if my son, her brother, gets married, that maybe his wife will introduce some of these things into her family traditions. But as far as my daughter, that's a done deal. Now, maybe in the future she will start. If she meets someone that likes these things, she may start. But as of right now, no, she doesn't. So my hope right now lies in my son's wife, when and if he gets one, are you, are your children, you know. Or maybe my grandson. I don't know. But I'm going to push the envelope on it.
That's interesting. Are there any food traditions you hope to pass on to us? Because I know you did the pineapple upside-down cake. You'd always done the monkey bread when we wanted monkey bread. We like your red rice. We like your banana pudding. Are there any specific food traditions you started that you want to pass on to me, Sam, and William?
Yes, actually, red rice, I love red rice. I did not have it a lot growing up. I have no reason why my mother didn't cook red rice. I have no clue, and I didn't think to ask when I was younger. And also pork. Now, my father did not eat pork, and it wasn't a religious thing. I did not eat pork. I just never had pork growing up. My mother never cooked it. The first time I had pork is when I met my future husband. We were dating. He was my boyfriend at the time, and he invited me to his home for dinner to meet his family. We were juniors in high school. And when I went over, they had pork roast, and I didn't know what the meat was. So when his mother fixed my plate, I kind of looked at the meat, and I was skeptical, and I sliced it, be hospitable, and I ate a little piece of it, and wow, my taste buds went wild. It was like, what is this? And I asked her, what kind of meat is this? And she kind of looked at me and smirked, and his sisters and brothers and him kind of looked at me weird. And he said, it's pork roast. I said, what? He said, pork roast. I said, oh, okay. And his mother asked me, you've never had pork roast? I said, ma'am, I've never had pork of any kind. And they found that very interesting. So it was about a month later I went to dinner at his house again. She had pork chops. So that's how I got introduced to pork. And every time I went over for dinner to his house, his mother made sure she had some type of pork dinner. Pork tenderloin, pork roast, pork chops, spare ribs, pork spare ribs. She made sure she introduced me to all of the pork that she could. So
I can honestly say I didn't know that was one of your first pork experiences.
Yeah.
Because, like, I've had pork since I was a kid, so I just figured it's something everyone eats. But I didn't know the first time you ate pork was whenever you dated Goomba.
Yes, and I passed it on to your mom and started cooking it. After we got married, I started cooking it because he loves pork chops and pork, bacon.
He does love hot dogs. He loves hot dogs.
So I introduced it and started cooking it, and your mom started cooking it, so that's how you come to eat pork. Now, maybe you would have been introduced to pork some other way, but because I was introduced to it, I introduced it to your mom and your uncle, my son, so then they carried it on. So that's probably how you started eating pork, because of her, and she started eating it because of me. I started eating it because of my husband. So that's the lineage of pork.
Our pork lineage.
Pardon?
I said that's our pork lineage?
Yes.
Interesting. So are there any ways you would want to redefine our food traditions? Like, would you want to, tweak it anyway, or is there something we could be doing better? Because I know as of now, I'm not a big cooker. Like, occasionally I'll use stovetop in the oven, but I am a big microwave fan. But is there anything you would do to change any of the recipes going on?
Yes. There are two things that I would definitely change, and the first one is sugar, because I bake, because of my mother, we had pineapple upside-down cake every time it was her time to pick a dessert. She loved pineapple upside-down cake, and my father loved banana pudding, which I dearly love both. But the amount of sugar that goes into it, I would probably try to tweak that to get sugar-free vanilla pudding, or, I would try to tweak the amount of sugar. And particularly with the pineapple upside-down cake, I would probably use the pineapple in its own juices versus the heavy syrup pineapple. And I would probably use applesauce in the cake instead of the 2 cups of sugar. So sugar is definitely one of the things that I would tweak. And I have started tweaking that, because just healthier, not to eat so much sugar.
But you also found out you had diabetes in the last decade, so that definitely plays a big part in you wanting to change the sugar portion.
Well, I wanted to change it before that because my husband was diabetic, and he was
Okay, so Grandpa was diabetic before you were.
Yes, 15 years I was. As of
wow.
the last,
I knew he was diabetic, but I didn't know he was diabetic that much longer than you.
oh yeah, he was diabetic early, and I did not get diagnosed with diabetes until 5 years ago, but he was diagnosed way back, 15 years prior to me. So I started tweaking it because of him. And the other thing is pork. Instead of putting pigtails and pork neck bones and ham hocks in my collards and in my vegetables, I've started using smoked turkey wings. So cutting back on the pork has been a big issue for me. Instead of the bacon, I get turkey bacon or turkey sausage, and I'm leaning very heavily on the turkey. And it tastes just as good with the smoked turkey, my collards, versus the ham hock and pigtails. So I definitely would like to pass that on, tweaking the recipe.
I always feel like no matter what, whenever you cook turkey, it just kind of comes out dry, whereas like pork holds in the moisture. And I definitely think that's something I like about pork. And I'm definitely partial to putting pork in collard greens, but I've never tried the turkey. But just hearing you talk about it, I don't think that's something I would be too interested in.
Well, you got to realize now the collard greens and the different vegetables are going to have liquid, and they're going to be moist. So the turkey is definitely going to suck up that juice. So you will never, ever have dry turkey when it comes to vegetables. Now, as far as Thanksgiving, when the turkey is first done, it is succulent, it is juicy. A lot of people say the breast is dry, but I don't find that. But after it's been sitting out for a while and I have to reheat it during different stages of the dinner, yes, it can dry out a little, but I just love the turkey. And a lot of people say they don't like it because it's dry. I don't find that it's ever dry meat. So, and then you have plenty of things to do with the leftover. I just made turkey tetrazzini after Thanksgiving with the leftover turkey. And then
so you still have turkey from Thanksgiving?
2
weeks after Thanksgiving. It's almost 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, and you still have turkey that you are.
Yes, you can eat it. You can eat it. We strip the meat off the bones, and I freeze it. So when I'm ready to use it, I can pull it out, defrost it, and use it. So that's another thing I love. Turkey freezes well. So I also made turkey salad, with the pickles and the mayo, and you can use it as a spread like tuna salad or chicken salad. I make turkey salad. And my son and my husband, oh, my gosh, they gobble it up. So, and they love the turkey tetrazzini I made last night for dinner. I made that with egg noodles. You put it on top of egg noodles. So turkey can be used a lot of different ways.
I can definitely say I don't have experience with, again, turkey. It's just not favorable for me. I'm definitely more of a pork beef kind of person. So you've talked a lot about pork. Do you have experiences with beef? Have you always eaten it, or did that get introduced to you later on in life as well?
No, I probably have eaten beef from the cradle because my father grew up on a farm, and they had cows, and we have always had beef. Steak, ground beef, we make meatloaf or spaghetti or meatballs, or my mother would cook steak on the grill. Beef has always been a part of my life, and as well as chicken. And interestingly, again, my husband introduced me to lamb. He loved lamb chops. I had never had lamb growing up, and I tasted it, but I'm not a fan of it. It's too strong and gamey. It's too strong for my taste. But he loves it, so every now and again when we can afford it, I will do lamb chops just for him, and that's usually around Easter. And that's usually when I will cook a lamb, do a leg of lamb or a lamb chops or something for him. But it's only around Easter that I'll do that.
So one of the themes that I'm really getting from us talking with one another is that your relationship with Goomba introduced you to a lot more meats than you had previously tasted.
Oh, those were the only two.
So you had tasted other kinds of meats, but you tasted other kinds of meats, but specifically he introduced you to.
He introduced me to lamb, and he introduced me to pork. Those were the two meats that he introduced me to. I tried to introduce him to so much more, but he'll have none of it. He is
a very picky eater.
Pardon?
I said he is a picky eater.
Well, there's a lot of stuff he just won't try. I don't know why. He just refused to try it.
I mean, I can kind of feel that, though, whenever you eat food that you really like and love. You're going to want to eat that same kind of food. You don't always, want to go and explore different tastes because you already know what you like.
But your grandfather even refused to try it. You've been around, tried to introduce different things.
I have.
Patty and different things I've tried. He won't even try it. So I, on the other hand, will try things. I mean, I will at least try it once. If I don't like it, I won't eat it. But I have never, ever said, I'm not eating that, except for one thing. There's been one thing in my life that I even refused to try, and those were oysters.
You don't like oysters? Because I love oysters.
Oh, what? No. I applaud the first brave man that ate an oyster. You just had to.
The only thing I will say is that I can only have the beans. I can't do the fresh kind where it looks like, snot in a shell. Like, it has to be a solidified meat, fried or steamed. I can't do the liquidy, because it just looks kind of gross. Like, who wants to put that in their mouth?
Exactly.
But I am definitely a big oyster fan.
The look alone, just the look of it is just so gross.
And that's why I like it steamed or fried.
I can't eat it.
Because it looks better.
Well, steam doesn't look that much better, honestly.
But it does, though.
Well, not to me, but fried is a little different. But steam or raw oysters, there's just no way I can eat that.
I don't know how people do raw oyster. Like, there's too many contaminants, there's too many factors, too many variables. No thank you, I'll pass. I will pass on that.
Yes. But the only other tradition other than food we have is in our social life, and it has changed so much. I don't even think people do it anymore. I did it with your mother, but I don't think that she's upheld that, and I tweaked it a whole lot for your mom. But with my grandmother. Pardon?
Can you explain the ways that you have tweaked it?
Well, the dating thing was the biggest thing that has changed with the generations, because with my grandmother, my mother, and father, it was just written in stone. I mean, you couldn't change it. An act of Congress would not change how they were with that. The first thing was no dating and no makeup till you turned 16. I mean, there was just taking it, no getting around it. You could not date or wear makeup until you were 16. And let me tell you, that went for the boys as well as the girls.
How would that apply to the boys?
He couldn't date till he was 16.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got caught up in the makeup part, and I'm like,
no.
You're wearing makeup?
No, he couldn't date. For girls.
Okay, I see that, yeah.
Yeah. And with me and your grandfather and then my mother before her, before we could date, we had to, my parents had to meet the young man, and then they had to meet his family. We had to sit down to a dinner. We had to go to their house, and they had to come to ours. My father would have it no other way. And if he approved of the family and the young man, because he's always drilled it into us, you not only marry the man, you marry the family. So if you don't get along with the family, it will put a strain on your marriage. And a lot of marriages can't hold up to the stress and the strain of bad relations with your in-laws. So when I started dating, there was a young man before your father, and there was a young man before my husband that we could not date, because after my father met his parents, he said, no, forget that. And we went over to their house, and the first thing, and my heart dropped, his mother, his name was Herman, his mother dropped down into the seat with a kaplunk and said a bad word. I won't say it here. And then at the dinner table, she pulled out her cigarette and she was smoking. I'm saying, oh, God, this is not going well. And
this is the first time that they met.
Yeah. They invited us over for dinner because my parents wanted to meet his parents. They wanted to see their home life, check stuff out, to make sure it was safe and it was conducive. It was good for me, not bad things. So she smoked and she used profane language quite a bit. And evidently his dad was a heavy drinker. And my father didn't smoke or drink or use profanity. My parents just didn't do that, not because they were so religious or anything. He just knew early on that smoking and drinking wasn't good for your health, and he always thought it was in poor taste and bad manners to use profane language. It didn't show a sign of intelligence. He always told that you have a vocabulary, use it. And it doesn't make you big or special or anything to use profane language. So when I was walking out the door when we were leaving, I just looked back at him and waved by as a tear rolled down my cheek because I liked him so much. But I knew it wasn't going to happen. So he called me about an hour or so later, and I told him I couldn't date him. And he was very sad about that. And so after that, I met my husband, which is your grandfather. And the first time my parents met his parents, they hit it off fine, and everything was just really great. And we had passed step one. Now, step two was you had to write a letter, and his parents and my parents had to sign it. And the letter was
situation?
We're in his care. He had to make sure he took care of us, that nothing bad happened to us. That he didn't take us to any dangerous places, no bad. Yes, he had to say he would be responsible for us in case we became in the family way, if you know what I mean. So yes, his parents signed it, my parents signed it, and me and him signed it. Now, when you broke up, we did not, but my sister had broken up with one or two boys. If you ever broke up, my father would give you the letter back and release you from any obligations. But he would not give the letter back for 3 months, and he would not release you from your obligations for 3 months, just in case something happened. So,
but he knows that it's not legally binding.
Well,
at least I don't assume something
like
that would be.
It's more of a moral thing and a more of a character thing. You know,
okay.
Like back in the day when a handshake was good enough. That your word is your bond. That's how my father felt. Your word is your bond. If you told him something, you shook hands on it, it's a done deal. It was better than a loan from the bank because your word is your bond. And he held you to that. So, no, in court it wouldn't hold up, but it says a lot about your moral character, and he held you to that. But with your father, he didn't give the letter back because, again, I mean my husband, because we stayed together. But on several occasions, my sister had like 2 or 3 boyfriends, and after 3 months, when everything was clear and everything was good, he gave the letter back. And with your mother, my daughter, when she started dating, and my son, we had to meet the boy's parents, and we met her husband's parents. That was when they were dating. We met them. They seemed to be very nice, down-to-earth people. We didn't see any signs of drugs or smoking or anything bad that would draw her in. So we approved that. The only thing we did not do was have him write a letter. So we changed that. And I'm not sure how your mother would handle dating when you and your brothers date, but we did meet the parents.
I think it'll be a very different process, just because, you know, you guys. So what was the decade in which you and Gupa dated?
Yes, and I think that's so sad, because girls and young men as well date 2, 3 different people. The parents know nothing about these people. If something happens to the daughter, they don't know what happened. People just aren't as rigid as making sure that their children today, they just don't get involved in who they're dating. They don't meet the parents. They don't go and...
I think that's a part of the culture, because back when you and Goompa dated, you know, social media and the internet, they weren't up. So, you know, anytime you put something on the internet, you can trace it. You can trace credit cards. You can find people anytime you really need to find them. You can, you know, look them up on Facebook. You can do all these things now, whereas back then you really didn't have the same capabilities. But
how do you invite it into their home? Even in this day and age with all the social media, how do you determine what kind of home life a young man or a young lady have? How do you determine what type of parents they have? What kind of rules they're instilled?
But it's a part of that culture.
You'll have to meet face-to-face. I firmly believe in that face-to-face meet and greet. I just think you can't get around that.
Face-to-face is definitely beneficial, but now with the internet, it kind of feels like the world is brought into your home. Like you can look at someone's feed, not to say that their feed will be accurate, because, you know, people, they put out all the happy but none of the bad stuff. But
exactly.
It almost seems like you can bring people into your living room, you can bring them into your home just by researching them. Whereas before, you couldn't do that. You had to meet them in person to get a feel for what they were about.
And this is just my opinion, but all the research in the world is not like walking through somebody's front door, sitting on their couch or to their dinner table and having a one-on-one conversation with them. So much can be gleaned from that. You can look around the house and see if it's clean, how well it's kept. There's just so much you can glean from that face-to-face. I don't think anything in the world can compete with it. There's nothing like getting a feel for somebody's home life. Yeah, you can put stuff on the internet, but until you walk through that front door and smell it, see it, look around, talk with the parents, pick their brains, you just will not get a feel for their character. You just don't know. You just can't get the content of their character, because people can say anything and put anything that sounds good on the internet. They're not going to put, my mom cusses like a sailor, or my mom can't cook, or my mom doesn't do the dishes.
Yeah, very few people do that on the internet.
Some kids might do that, but for the most part, no kid wants to badmouth their parents or their home life. A lot of kids just don't do that. So, yeah, I believe in the meet and greet. And those were the 2 things I remember growing up, and the fact that my mother would never, ever let someone come to our home and not offer them a meal. When you hit that door, first thing she's going to ask you, hello, how are you? I'm so-and-so. Would you care for something to eat or drink? She was always hospitable with that. And you dare not go in her kitchen without washing your hands. And you probably have gotten that from me and your grandfather. If you
Every
guys,
time I walk in after I play with the dog, have you washed your hands?
That's right. You don't go in.
I'll just be watching TV and you'll ask me, have you washed your hands?
Exactly. And I got that from my parents and my grandmother. We would just drive from our house to her house, and first thing we all did is line up and wash our hands in the bathroom. You couldn't even get a drink of water out the refrigerator without washing your hands. She says, you don't know what's on that steering wheel? You don't know what's on the handle of that door? She wasn't a germaphobe, but she just didn't let you come in, as you can attest. We always, your sister, your mom, did you wash your hands? Don't go in that kitchen or that refrigerator till you wash your hands. So that's one thing that I still take in my life from my parents as well. And my husband's parents. His mother, when you hit that door, you had to wash your hands. And that was the first family I met that had the same rules that my parents had. So those are some of the things that I grew up with that I passed on to my children, my son and my daughter, and hopefully she will pass them on to you and your brothers.
So just taking a look back at how dating was whenever you were with Goompa, dating with Mom, what are some of the expectations that you expect from me and my brothers whenever we do start to date people who we are really serious about?
The first thing I would tell you was meet the family. I cannot stress that enough. Meet the parents. Talk with the parents. See what kind of education, home life. See some of their values. Because believe it or not, if not all, some of those values are going to rub off on that young man or that young lady. So that would be my first advice. Don't just date guys for months on end, never knowing what their home life is like, never having met their parents. I cannot stress that enough. That would be my first thing. My second thing would be pay attention to what they do and the friends they hang around with. If you are dating someone and he decides he wants to experiment or try drugs, or if he's not doing drugs, but he's hanging around his friends that do drugs, that's a red flag right there. Or if he's smoking.
Because you are the company you keep.
Exactly. Birds of a feather flock together. So somewhere down the line, either he's going to try it or he's going to try to introduce you to it. That is my stronghold right there. Any young man or young lady that's with you that encourages you to lie to your parents, tell them we're going to the movies, but we're going to a party. The first thing he's doing is teaching you to lie and deceive your parents. That is not a good person. Second thing,
I don't really feel like me, Sam, and William will have that problem. I mean, again, I can't predict the future. At the current moment, we don't smoke. We don't do any of that. I might drink every so often, but I guess that'll definitely change as we get older and we're not so reliant on you and Mom, especially financially. Because when you hold the financial reins, like everything else falls in line. But whenever we become truly independent, I would like to think we wouldn't involve ourselves in those kind of things.
I would think we would have instilled in you, and you could see our life growing up, your mom growing up, how we never got introduced to drugs or cigarettes. And people to this day still don't believe me or your mom. None of our friends ever introduced us to drugs. My whole time going to school, high school, college, none of my friends ever, and your mom told me the same thing. The whole time she went through high school, none of her friends ever introduced her to drugs. And I was the same way because you're conscious of the people you hang around with, and I think you select like people who are like you. So I think that played a big part in it. So, yeah, you got to monitor the person you're dating. I don't care how much you have a crush on them, you claim to love them, because if they love you, they would do nothing, absolutely nothing, to hurt you. So love me as you love yourself. And if you do bad things, that's telling me you don't love yourself. You've got issues somewhere along the line. So, yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Well, I really enjoyed talking with you today about traditions concerning food and dating, just because I know it's a lot of the things that I experience or that I've seen or that I just walk by, but I don't think we've ever actually had the chance to talk about these things and, flesh them out.
And we haven't. We will say things, or we will tell you stories about growing up or, different things, but we've never really sat down and discussed it like we're discussing it. And I know I've told you the story about the young man your mother dated, and he sat in our driveway and honked for her to come out. Really? You're going to honk for my daughter to come out, not even come to the door and meet us? And my husband called the cops and reported him as trespassing. The cops showed up. He was in shock. He says, "What have I done?" And the cops told him, "You're trespassing." And my father came to the door. "I don't know you. I've never met you. You never came to my door. You just pulled up in my driveway." So, yeah, my husband called the cops, and they escorted him off, and my daughter was told, and your mother will tell you, she was not allowed to date him. And another time, one young man came to the door, his shoelaces untied, his pants halfway around his butt. I ran to that door before my husband got up there. I said, "Sweetheart, please, if you want to date my daughter, tie those shoes and pull up them pants." So he did that, and they dated for a couple months, but it didn't last because, again, she saw things in him that she was never introduced to, things that weren't good, and we didn't even have to tell her. She broke up with him. So I think that somewhere deep down, you retain what you're brought up with, So there's a good argument for that, your surroundings. Nurture versus nature, or I think that's what it is they argue against. So, I believe in nurture. But it was wonderful talking with you and expressing my traditions as far as dating, home life. It's been very eye-opening because a lot of stuff I forgot until I started talking to you, and it all came back. So thank you very much.
Thank you for being available to have this conversation. I will see you in the near future.
Yes, you will, and thank you so much for having me take this walk down memory lane. It has been so refreshing because children today don't want to hear this stuff. Oh, that's old time, that's old fogey. They just don't want to hear it. So it's so refreshing that you did this interview, and that's what you chose. And I'm very proud of you for that.
Well, thank you, Johnie. Okay, if you stop for just one moment,